Tonight, Michael Cohen suing the Trump Organization, Paul Manafort about to get his sentence, and Democrats ratcheting up the probes at the president. A former federal prosecutor will join us to try and make sense of it all. Then, we are getting new details about family separations at the border, and the situation appears to unbelievably actually be getting worse, not better. We're going to show you what we're talking about. Also, a Trump biographer dishes the dirt on Trump's business career, his family, and the people he has surrounded himself with. Evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. Paul Manafort, he is literally still in court right now awaiting his sentence. We thought he would have gotten this hours ago. He could be looking to as much as 25 years behind bars, and at his age, that's basically a life sentence. Donald Trump's former campaign chairman, he was found guilty of defrauding banks, failing to pay taxes on millions of dollars he earned for political consulting in the Ukraine, and he also awaits sentencing for a different set of crimes for a case in a whole different jurisdiction. Manafort, he was the first indictment that Mueller announced way back in 2017. As the Mueller probe appears to be winding down, theoretically, House Democrats, they're ramping up their investigations of the president. The Judiciary Committee alone, they've sent out 81 letters requesting information from the administration, the Trump Organization, the Trump campaign, the inaugural committee, and well, the list goes on. Here's what the president had to say about that. Here he is.
I guess we got 81 letters. There was no collusion. There was a hoax. There was no anything. And they want to do that instead of getting legislation passed. 81 people or organizations got letters. It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace to our country.
Fake news. Now, Michael Cohen, he suing the Trump Organization for nearly $2 million. Trump's former attorney says he hasn't been paid since he started cooperating with prosecutors. Cohen, he testified behind closed doors yesterday before the House Intelligence Committee, and while we can't learn the contents given that it was a confidential conversation, apparently he had a lot more to say. Take a listen to what California Congresswoman Jackie Speier had to say. She sits on the Intel Committee.
He was very compelling, that his testimony was both revealing and explosive on yet another level that was different from what it was during the Oversight and Government Reform hearing last week. He talked about other issue areas, and I think that what we will find over the long term is that we have someone who is sitting in the White House right now who has a record that we have seen, frankly, from the time he was feigning bone spurs, that he's always been on the edge and acting in a manner that could be argued to be fraudulent, could be argued that he has evaded taxes and has conducted himself in a way in which he has created a conspiracy to suborn perjury.
Well, to help sort many of this stuff out, or at least try, let's bring in former federal prosecutor Barrett Berger. She's now director of the Center for Advancement of Public Integrity over at Columbia Law School. A lot to unpack here, but I'm curious, if you're with the Trump legal team right now, what's concerning you most? What could be coming down the pike from the Mueller report? The fact that Congress has got committee after committee now subpoenaing 81 different individuals for records? Or is what's going on that you don't know about at the Southern District?
I think what concerns me the most is going to be New York. Honestly, so many of the different investigations circling this administration and the president have now started to focus on the activities in New York. So whether that's looking into the finances of the Trump Organization, obviously you have the AG's office looking in the foundation. Now you have regulators looking into, potential insurance fraud. So I think all of the activity circling around New York right now is probably what's making them the most nervous.
We spoke to your old colleague, Mimi Rocha, and others also that were at the Southern District, and they gave a little reprisal for our audience as to the powers of the Southern District here, as to how far-ranging and really the professionals that are there. Give an idea as to why not only pardons don't work when it comes to what comes out of the Southern District and the pros that are there. And we'll talk about Dan Goldman in a second, but what kind of things could they be looking at? I assume Trump Organization, Trump Foundation, inauguration, you name it, right? They could be going into it and the White House would be none the wiser.
That's exactly right. And it's important to remember the Southern District has, in many ways, a much broader mandate than the special counsel's office had. So they're not limited to just looking into, Russian collusion. They can look at any sort of federal crime that falls within their jurisdiction. So that could include, looking into tax fraud violations. That could include, really digging into the finances of the organization, which is something that's going to make them nervous. I think that's always been, one area that, from all the reporting we've heard about, it's kind of been this bright line that the president has warned people not to cross, to go into, digging too deeply into the finances. And that's exactly what prosecutors in the Southern District of New York do all the time. I mean, it's really the traditional follow the money type investigation. So I would anticipate that's exactly what they're doing right now. And that should make anyone nervous, having them look into your books. Especially
given all the reporting with the Trump organization and some of the open-ended questions about some of those finances. You mentioned Russia, and your old colleague when you were at the Southern District, Dan Goldman, he's been named by the House Intel Committee to ratchet up their investigations. He has a specific background as it relates to the Russian mob. Why do you think that's instructive, given the mandate, at least, of the committee he's going to be working with?
Look, I think hiring Dan was a very smart decision. He's a career prosecutor. He was at the Southern District for a decade, if not more. He's somebody that's really going to bring a trained investigative eye to this. But it's important to remember, too, Dan is not a political figure. He's going to approach this as a seasoned prosecutor, really looking for crimes, not trying to make political stunts. I think his background working with organized crime will certainly come in handy, whether it's understanding how organizations work, whether it's understanding how sometimes instructions can be given by the leader of an organization that may not be explicit. It may not be saying, I need you to go commit a crime. It may be sort of a raised eyebrow or talking in code, as we've heard in Michael Cohen's congressional testimony. All that's going to play into sort of the background understanding that Dan brings to this.
Barrett, there's 30 different investigations by 12 House committees, and they're looking for, obviously, documentation, cooperation with the White House. At this point, the White House has told them, basically, take a leap. That's in contrast to when Ty Cobb was running the legal team for the White House and the Mueller probe began. They were very cooperative. What's going on here?
Yeah, you're right. And Ty Cobb, I think, always had a bit more of a measured approach to how they were going to deal with the special counsel's office. He encouraged, a cooperative stance. I think his idea was, if you don't have anything to hide, then you should be cooperative with the investigation, and let's just clear this up quickly so we can go about our daily lives. That tactic changed, and they're certainly taking a more aggressive approach now. I think one reason you may see them being more combative with the House is because, Mueller came to that job with an air of, unimpeachable integrity. So he had many people from the left and the right talking about what a straight shooter he was, what a, career investigator, and how this is not somebody who was going to do anything that was political. He was just going to do the right thing. Obviously, the House does not have the same benefit of that impartiality. So it is necessarily a political investigation that they're running. That's the whole nature of it. So I think that the White House probably feels they have a little bit more latitude to push back now, because this is a political investigation instead of dealing with somebody that, had the integrity that Mueller does.
I can't believe I'm saying this. Omarosa, we're talking Apprentice fame now. She said a name to look out for here is Rona Graff. Between Weisselberg and Graff are people that were around the Trump organization long before he was ever considered a candidate, let alone became president. The contention is they know where the bodies are buried right now. How far back do you think they not only can, but will go in terms of not only his tax returns, his business dealings? I mean, are we talking possibly going back decades? Where does the mandate allow for these probes to go or not go?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Democrats have to be careful here. I think you don't want it to look like too much of a fishing expedition, right? You can't just say, hey, can you please bring the president's calendars from the last 20 years so that we can see if he's ever had some kind of a sketchy meeting. That's both improper and probably politically will probably politically backfire as well. What I think they have to do, and they should be strategic in this, is tying everything to, really the themes of the current investigation. So making sure that everything that they are trying to ask, Weisselberg, whether it's Rona Graff, everything that they're asking, what is the purpose here? Are we looking towards, the big central question that the Mueller team was of, Russian interference in the election? Are we looking at issues of potential obstruction of justice? I don't think that Congress has the mandate to just say, hey, let's go back, 15 years and see if you ever did anything that might be criminal. I think that's pushing the line too far. But if they can try to, connect things to show patterns or, how potentially criminal acts from the past may still be affecting, ongoing business or ongoing conflicts, then they're on stronger ground.
As will so many things. Barrett, I appreciate the time as always. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody, when we come back, we're going to turn to the border. More confusion and horror stories coming from the administration's child separation policy. We'll explain, and we'll also be joined by a reporter from Axios who's been following closely this story and has some really interesting revelations as to what's really been going on.